During the call, Rio is asked not to panic and to listen carefully. The conversation concerns the tragic death of his parents. Lying in front of the truck and losing consciousness, he heard that maybe everything happened as it was destined. At first, he feels neither fear of death nor relief, only a weak, barely noticeable feeling of regret. Although he does not know why, he feels a little sorry for himself. Tomorrow should have been his 20th birthday. Suddenly, he finds himself in a strange new world full of exciting adventures and the wonder of magic. He crossed swords with a woman and faces various enemies in numerous battles. But his full story will be revealed a little later. Because for readers, the idea of reincarnation seems like pure fantasy. But for Rio, it is truly real, something that turns his life upside down. Confused, he hears a voice asking if his name is real Amenhara. He confirms in the voice message they say they haven't had visitors for a long time, and inform him that he died in an accident. The man explains that in rare cases, people from Earth after death reincarnate and are transported to another world on Earth. This process is called samsara. And this time the chosen one is Rio, who is still confused. The man offers a simple choice. Rio can reincarnate in another world while retaining all his memories. Surprised, Rio compares this to the story of the icy kiss. The man agrees, saying that yes, that is an apt description, and Rio thoughtfully adds that he has a few questions for him. His first question is whether the man is God, but the man denies it himself, and Rio says that he seemed like an angel. Running this through his mind, Rio mentally gives the man the nickname Fake Michael and wonders if someone is reading his thoughts. He asks a second time why is he being reincarnated, and the angel replies that they do not make such decisions. The entity that Rio calls God decided and did not even explain the reasons to the angel. Rio's third question is what he should do in this new world because he still feels lost. The angel calmly explains that Rio can do whatever he wants and gives no specific instructions. Rio thought that he could live any life he desired, so he chooses a peaceful one and accepts the offer. The angel, delighted that Rio agreed, outlines the new world, and Fake Michael explains. It resembles Earth, but there is magic in it, and gunpowder and firearms are very rare. Rio curiously asks if there really is magic in the new world, and learns that once there was magic on Earth too, but now it is no longer practiced. Rio is still processing the thought that there was magic on Earth, while the angel is already preparing to reveal the new world. A globe appears and an announcement sounds. This world is called Fire. The angel smiles and says that 1 in 5 people has a tendency for magic, and in Rio it will manifest as the gift of water magic. Disappointed, Rio asks if he can switch from water magic to fire or earth magic. Fake Michael explains that magical talents granted by the gods at birth are fixed and unchangeable, and Rio then asks if he is doomed to water magic forever. With a gentle smile, the angel explains that the ability to work with water is extremely valuable because people survive thanks to water. In the new world, more than 8 of people cannot use magic, so Rio is extremely lucky. Rio understands. Water and sodium are a matter of survival, and in the medieval world not worrying about water is a huge advantage. With admiration, Rio asks Fake Michael if water magic can heal, but the angel clarifies healing is related to light magic. They will let down. Rio accepts this explanation. The angel explained to him elemental magic, mentioned that there is also non-elemental magic, but insisted that Rio focus on mastering his water magic. He smiles and says that Rio's physical abilities are above average, and in Fae improvement depends on effort, not levels or skills. When Rio asks how to strengthen his physical and magical abilities, the angel explains that, as on Earth and in Fae, people become stronger through regular training and practice. Fake Michael emphasizes this at the end, urging Rio to take his development seriously. When assured that diligent work will bear fruit, worried Rio realized, without dedication in this new world he will not succeed in thriving. After a few more explanations, the narrator hints, it's time for Fake Michael to ask about Rio's plans. Rio enthusiastically says he wants to live quietly somewhere in the wilderness. With a smile, the angel decides to reincarnate him in the Rhonda forest. He left food for 2 months, remembered the 100-meter protective barrier around the house, and advised Rios to learn magic for hunting. He also points to the beach southwest of the house. There Rios can collect salt directly from the sea. Suddenly remembering he missed an important question, Rios sharply asked, how to use magic. Fake Michael explains to Rios that he must constantly clearly imagine magic during practice. Mastery does not come instantly. Rios vows to work hard and sincerely thanks Fake Michael for his guidance. At that moment, he regains consciousness, lying on a folding bed in the middle of the airplane cabin. He gets up and notices the hut looks old, as if from the Middle Ages. Leaving the room, he sees a sturdy table on it, 2 books, around several chairs. For now, ignoring the books, he goes further and in another room finds a bath that reminds him of Roman public baths, and feels grateful for his private one. Suspecting that Fake Michael created this considering his Japanese roots, he also wonders about the angel's gender. In a moment, he remembered the books and went back to look through them. One turned out to be a guide about monsters, and the other described local plants. A note from the fake Michael revealed the truth. The food was hidden in a silo outside, which was also a freezer proof that the angel could read his mind. Real comments sound that he does not have the typical appraisal skill, and immediately a warning from the fake Michael about this appears. He finds a knife, attaches it to his belt, and sees nothing else notable in the cabin. Ready to go outside, he steps out and is struck by the boundless, stunning landscape. Staring at the distant mountains, he imagines dragons and monsters and decides to keep away from them. Looking at the landscape, he finally feels he really has found himself in another world. Meanwhile, the fake Michael wonders how wonderful it would be someday to have a physical body and live a peaceful life like Rio's. The fake Michael thinks that Rio will sooner or later discover something important, and reviewing his screen, notices a hidden ability and is surprised not to understand how it ended up here. He recalls that he had seen this ability only once in that girl when he started working with reincarnation 10,000 years ago, and now wonders what reuse could mean. On the screen, it turns out Rio's hidden ability is eternal youth. Rio, now in his new world of magic and swords, is eager to test his new powers. Water magic is his only skill, and he recalled the advice of the fake Michael. Imagine magic, focus, and think about water. Closing his eyes, Rio opened them in surprise and saw water bubbles floating before his raised hands. Realizing he was using magic for the first time, he, recalling the teachings of the fake Michael, watches a water bubble fall to the ground, understands that no spells are needed, and wonders if the physics here is the same as on Earth. He also remembers how the angels warned about the barrier. Before stepping beyond its 100-meter protection, one must be ready for battle. He will not dare to step beyond the boundary without preparation. There is only enough food left in the silo for 2 months, and the only weapon is the knife from the fake Michael. Even on Earth, fighting a wild boar with just a knife is impossible, so resisting monsters and fays is simply unthinkable. Filling the bathtub with water, Rio has another weapon option. He realizes that the key to his magic lies in the mental image of what he wants. Deep in thought, he imagines hydrogen bonds. Understanding that knowledge of how something works allows him to imagine it, he creates a thin water lens, makes ice, and manages to boil and thaw water. Suddenly, he falls to the floor in the bathroom, exhausted, and realizes his magic is depleted. On the morning of the 5th day, he prepares rabbit from the silo. I noticed the fake Michael left only salt for seasoning, and it seems to be under a spell that keeps the food frozen. Rio relentlessly honed his skills in hunting and in the perfect preparation of meat. He also immerses himself in those difficult beginner textbooks left by the angel. While eating and reading, he thinks about how to learn to heal, make antidotes, and create fire without a water blade. When the sun sets, he naps several times during the day with faith. Again and again, he creates and melts ice, sharpening his magical abilities. During another training session, he notices ice appears in 5 seconds, but making it fly does not work, although during the day his water always floats. Rio, gathering ingredients inside the barrier, goes on long runs to harden his strength and magic. He prepares for hunting. At night, he sharpens his skills, creates ice, and evaporates water. This routine repeats daily. And already on the 13th day in the ferry, he stands with a knife attached by ice to a stick. In one hand, magical water bubbles, in the other a spear with an ice blade. He feels confident in his magical progress, so he decides to name the new technique Ice Spear, although he still cannot make the ice fly. For today, his goals are to find herbs for cleansing and a stone to kindle fire. With determination in his heart, he is full of enthusiasm and zealously takes on his tasks. For the first time, he steps beyond the barrier. Armed with a spear, he is about to head southwest to the beach that the deceitful Michael talks about. Rio cautiously makes his way through the dark forest, stepping over small stones and obstacles. Having emerged from the dark forest, he froze in awe. An incredible landscape unfolded before him. Under the bright sun, a sparkling river spreads out before his eyes. Enchanted by the beauty of the landscape, he reaches the river and decides to descend the mountain he had climbed. During the descent, Rio notices something on the ground and crouches to take a closer look. Looking carefully, he notices quartz, one of his goals for today. He cannot believe his eyes how easily he found it, knowing it will solve the problem of lighting a fire at home. Continuing his path along the river, he estimates, if he goes northeast, the house will remain to the left, so he will always know where his home is and where to run when danger arises. Walking, he thinks about phase monsters and asks himself if he could defeat some, but remains uncertain. Remembering his second task to find cleansing herbs, Rio strains to recall the advice from the book. Suddenly, a noise sounded behind him. He turned sharply. He flinched at the sight of a small hole. The creature fiercely lunges at him, and frightened Rio barely manages to react. The board is rapidly approaching, and he desperately dives aside to avoid its attack. In front of everyone on the ground, he sees the board preparing to rush again. Still recovering from a leg injury, he notices the board charging toward him again. His hands touch the ground, and the path between him and the board suddenly turns into a slippery sheet of ice. The board unexpectedly slips and cannot control its movement. An idea flashes in Rio's mind. Although he cannot make his spear eyes fly, his current skills might be enough. When the wave rolled over him, it crashed into the giant ice spears he created. Exhausted, Rio collapses with relief, and the pierced boar lies dead. After that life-and-death struggle, he begins to eat less scylla food and rely more on his own prey. He finally understands. The monsters of this world possess magic, and the stronger the monster, the more powerful its spells. Fake Michael told him that the more he uses magic, the stronger it becomes, while monsters have been using theirs since birth. Rio gradually learns to overcome them. His abilities are steadily growing step by step. While they were preparing a large piece of boar meat, a fallen giant boar lay behind. He suddenly realizes, the real difference between animals and monsters is the magic stone near the heart, which only monsters have. The boy learns that in the world of monsters, their species determines what kind of magic they use, and that monsters from the Rhonda forest nearly wiped out ordinary animals. But still, from time to time, you see living animals, crocodiles, and agile rabbits. Yet carnivorous animals remain dangerous to people. They are just not as scary, and do not pose such a challenge as monsters do. In this world, monsters rule the food chain with their strength, and their magic makes everything much more complicated. Focusing on the new monster, Rio suddenly remembers. The book had already described this creature. This horned bison effortlessly crushes giant crocodiles and uses wind magic to make its charges deadly. Suddenly, something unexpected falls from the sky and severs the bison's head from its body. Rio slowly approaches the fallen bison and notices that his new water magic guillotine is impressive. Suddenly, he notices something in the water devouring the bison's head. Approaching closer, he sees with what furious speed it is eating it. Suddenly, he realized the blood in the water attracted a fish resembling an earthly paranaca. Rio diligently adhered to his water magic training as much as he could, and thus honed control over the speed of water streams so well that he could pierce everything except magical shields. He invented a superfast rotating water disc that cuts objects, and ice rollers that ease manual labor and processing of hunted animal skins. Rio trained his body as persistently as his magic because he knew monsters are unpredictable. The snake's tail swiftly lunged toward him. A giant snake kite appears, and he remembers that it uses wind magic to wield its tail like a sonic sword. Rio boldly looks the snake in the eyes. With one strike of its sonic tail, the snake slices a nearby stone as if it were paper. Swiftly dodging, Rio paused for a moment and assessed himself while water bubbles swirled around him, preparing a counterattack. Staring intently at the snake, he notices that soft rain is falling above them. Rio raises her hand, focused on catching every raindrop swirling around the snake. The snake lunges at him with fierce intent. Having finished concentrating, Rio launches massive icy spears with a sharp gesture, which pierce the serpent and instantly kill it. The serpent's venom was neutralized by the rain, which could probably withstand even boiling water. But there are monsters like the deadly eagle, which uses wind magic and supersonic speed. Rio's simple tricks no longer work on us. True sprints at insane speed, chased by the deadly eagle. The eagle crashed into the ground with incredible force and knocked Rio aside. Regaining his balance, Rio sharply attacks the evil again with a close spear strike. He is sure he hit, but the eagle darted back, dodging his strike. He slightly grazed near its eye, thinking that a direct hit to the eye would definitely affect it. This was the strongest monster he had encountered so far. Focused on defense, he feels that the counterattack saved him, but another monster might suddenly appear in the fight. The Book of Monsters by False Michael impressed a real collection with detailed descriptions of creatures, and Rio, taking it as a beginner's guide, thought there must be intermediate and advanced versions, noticing 2 special pages at the end. On one page, an illustration of a dragon, on the other Akuma, a humanoid monster. These pages were for those who aspired to become the greatest, but Rio had no such ambitions. He just wanted a peaceful life and lived for it. Rio marks his first full year in the new world, and on a moonlit night his fate leads him to what seems like another humanoid figure. A year has passed since arriving in Fae, on a lake in the northernmost forest of Rhonda. When the moon is nearly at its zenith, a headless warrior Dylan appears before him. Rio wonders what that headless knight is doing in the Rhonda forest and where it came from. The true power of the knight lies in her incredible swordsmanship, and the fact that she is not in beginner monster books suggests either she is not a monster or she is not for beginners at all. If that Dylan stays away from magic, Rio decides, I will not use it either. Knight, a skilled swordsman and arrogant, decided to teach Rio against his will, wounded and thrown to the ground. Rio feels exactly that after 3 blows that would kill anyone. Knight turns away from him. Mounting her horse, she rides off, as if expecting Rio to be better next time. Rio was not sure if his attacks affected the knight at all. He failed to land a single clean hit. Every day his determination grows stronger. He suffered his first defeat almost immediately, but this clash lasted a whole hour. Rio now moves faster, anticipating knight actions during the fight. But when his ice sword clashed with the blade of the knight, it shattered into pieces. Stunned, Rio looks at the headless knight, which launches an attack and throws him several meters back. Lying wounded, he realized this time at least 3 hits. When he raised his rear, the knight froze as if waiting for something. It draws its sword, places a hand on the blade, and makes it shine brightly. The sword transforms, grows, and completely changes shape. The knight extends the blade to Rio, mounts a horse, and rides away, leaving him with a new weapon. Kneeling with the sword in his hands, Rio perceives it as a gift from the master to the apprentice and firmly decides to train even harder with the new weapon. After the clash with the killer eagle, he finally understood what it takes to become stronger. Every morning, he does 30 minutes of physical exercises to build muscle. He rushes, pushing magic to the limit, and trains to master the sword. With the headless knight nearby, he learns that the right hand guides the blade. While the left hand catches every strike, his strength and speed only grow. In the second clash with the killer eagle that came with a partner, the first eagle lost an eye in close combat. This time he will not repeat that mistake. Exhausted from dodging attacks from both eagles, Rio anticipated this. Using various magic, he dodges the second treacherous attack. But one eagle did not expect his partner to fall so quickly, so he retreated. Ray thought that the eagle was the first enemy who several times drove him to the brink of death. He had met death before. But the one-eyed eagle felt different. Here it is, their third and final encounter. The eagle looks completely different after the previous battles. Looking closely, Rio notices that it is darker, bigger, and enveloped in a black aura. The eagle lunges at him. Rushing in to attack, Rio barely dodges and, hitting the ground, remembers that the eagle had already used this move in their first fight. Taking the blow, he is sure this is the same creature, only now it has evolved. The battle blazes. Rio defends with all his might, realizing how much the eagle has grown and become powerful. The eagle breaks his ice armor, and when he tries to restore it, suddenly he cannot use magic. The eagle lunges again, and Rio, barely dodging, feels his strength fading. Rio suspects that ego somehow blocks his magic. The eagle let out a piercing scream and released a lightning-fast spell that spread in a wide strip ahead. Dodging the lightning, Rio loses his spear. Seizing the chance, the eagle attacks again. Rio draws his new sword. He thought that through it he could channel magic. In their final fierce clash, their gazes locked, and they struck the eagle's weak spot lightning fast, causing it to weaken. Looking into his healthy eye, Rio whispers that he understands his struggle. He lost a partner and an eye but fought until the very end. He admits that their battles made him stronger and thanks the eagle for it. He praises him for his courage, for showing his transformation, and says it is an honor for him to deliver the final blow. Drawing the sword from his throat, he decides his fate forever. The next day, Rio returns to the battlefield where he fought the one-eyed killer eagle, sees the traces of the clash, and feels the victory is real, but there is no pride in it. Rio stands, and then something descends before him that instantly captures all his attention. A huge dragon lands before him. It freezes and communicates telepathically. I think to myself, is this how it establishes contact with humans? It says it hasn't contacted a human in a long time and asks if Rio hears it. Rio, still trembling, begins to hear the dragon's voice in his head. Dragon, please, he hears, confirms that it is the one standing before him. Rio wonders if it is telepathy and apologizes for his shock, and calms the dragon, who now hears him. When the dragon asks if he has seen nearby a bird that grew from a killer eagle, Rio realizes that he knows that bird well. He immediately apologizes, in case the bird was an ally of the dragon. The dryad said she is not an acolyte, she was just curious, because the bird suddenly disappeared from this area. The dragon thought it would be logical if another dragon ate the bird, so he descended from the mountain to investigate. With fear in his eyes, Rio admits killed the one-eyed killer eagle. Dragon, surprised, says everything is fine, satisfied with the explanation of the bird's disappearance. They say that this bird is the first in centuries to have evolved in the forest, and ask if it suppressed Rio's magic. Rio instantly confirms this, and says he can hardly believe it. He could not use his magic. He felt as if his mage's rights were violated. The dragon notices something in Rio and says that he carries a strange thing, a sword that the dragon recognizes as Kings of the Fae. But Rio explains that he got it from a headless knight at the northern lake. The dragon confirms that knight is the king of the water fae who lives in the forest. Rio says he is a water mage and that the sword was saved the day before. The dragon says that is why the king favored him, hinting that he is learning magic from the king. Rio quickly denies taking magic lessons from the king of the water fae. Rio explains that he trained with the sword under the king of the water fae and never saw him use magic. The dragon is surprised that Rio learned swordsmanship instead of water magic from the king, but says that probably the king himself sees the need for this. The dragon adds that the king of the water fairies probably has a favorable attitude towards Rio after all. They have both lived for thousands of years. Seizing the moment, Rio asks permission to ask a few questions. The dragon agrees. Rio says he wants to learn about the Rhonda forest, its size, and what kind of place it is, and the dragon reveals that the Rhonda forest, once called the subcontinent Rhonda, is so vast that it can be compared to a small continent. Around it is water, and only to the north is it embraced by mountains. The dragon says that, as far as he knows, Rio is the only human on the entire continent of Rondo, and stunned, Rio realizes He dreamed of a quiet, secluded life, but not to this extent. The dragon, stunned, says it cannot be. He has lived his whole life alone, so he asks where Rio is from. Without hesitation, Rio shares that he reincarnated from another world and knows that others came the same way. In the second sentence, the dried, is this a typo? Did you mean the dragon, the druid, or something else? Rio froze like a statue when the dragon began to fly away, saying he was called, but promising they would meet again. In despair, Rio asks his name and gives his own. The dragon named Luen warns Rio, avoid the eastern mountains, dragons there can attack without hindrance. Then he rushes off at a terrible speed, breaking the sound barrier. Rio watches in awe as Luen takes off into the sky at supersonic speed, and filled with excitement, says that dragons are truly incredibly powerful. When the dust settled, later Luen reached the place of the summons. Luen is amazed. Rio is so unusual that he seems sometimes like a human, sometimes like some evolutionary or mutated creature. Recalling his story, he says he has never encountered anything like it, and these tales have greatly intrigued him. He relies on the fact that even after a long life there are still unknowns, and he waits with excitement to see what will happen next. Looking into the water mirror, Rio notices he has not aged a day. Sometimes his hair grows long, and he trims it just like his nails, they also periodically grow back. While bathing, he notices that his height and face have not changed, so today he plans to go fishing and gather salt. In the morning, in a warm bath, he sinks into thoughts. On the beach, Rio notices pieces of wood scattered across the sand. Then he notices something and rushes towards it. Approaching closer, he suspected a shipwreck. Only 3 people were visible on the sand. Examining the first, he quietly says that he has been dead for a long time. From afar, Rio sees the second man, pierced through by a piece of wood, and realizes that he can no longer be saved. He notices the third man in armor lying on the neighboring sand. Approaching closer, Rio sees that his right hand is shattered and bleeding heavily. Carefully examining the wound, Rio suspects that an artery is hit due to such heavy bleeding. He understands that leaving him means inevitable death and decisively begins to help. Focusing on the wound, he holds his breath and considers whether to use his water magic. Remembering that the human body is 60 water, he realized, as a water mage he can control the blood. Concentrating to the limit, he finds the source of the bleeding and immediately sets about stopping it. Straining, he surrounds the wound with water, stopping the bleeding. The blood still flows at first, but more slowly, and Rio feels pride he managed to help the man. Rio picks up the man in armor from the burning sand and carries him in his arms. Soon, among the ruins, he finds a cart and seats the man in it to make it easier to transport him. Later, the man suddenly wakes up and finds himself frightened in an unfamiliar place. Standing, he suddenly realizes he is in a large house and wonders if it belongs to the village head. To the right, he notices something. His sword and armor are leaning against the wall. Going outside, he sees Rio with firewood, says that he is Abel, asks if it was Rio who saved him, and sincerely thanks him for saving his life. Rio waved off, saying that he brought Abel home only after he found him on the beach. He adds that he was able to save only one of the 3 men, and Abel calms him down by revealing that they were smugglers. Rio froze, looked at Abel, and asked if they were really smugglers. She suspects that Abel might have been one of them because he was nearby, but she doubts it. He doesn't seem like a bad person. Thoughtfully, he notices that they communicate easily, realizes that Abel probably doesn't speak Japanese, and credits fake Michael for allowing them to understand each other. Rio smiles, introduces herself to Abel, and assuming he is hungry, offers him food. Abel is still shocked. Rio said that his clothes are probably already dry. Returning to the beach, Rio showed Abel where the 2 were, not understanding what happened to their bodies, and sighed, telling how lucky he was. While Abel asked to speak more simply, Rio explained that with elders it's always formal, but Abel wants it to be friendly. In silence, Rio thought that maybe Faye is his first friend, and Abel wonders whether the ship's cargo sank or disappeared. Maybe it is now in the stomach of some creature and nothing can be done. He thinks about Rio, but says that what he is looking for is no longer on the shore. He explains that he must get to the city to send a message to friends. Rio, unfamiliar with the city, assumes that it is to the north, and warns Abel that it will be a long journey. Rio tells Abel that there are no cities or people nearby, but Abel insists he must set out no matter what. Abel returned to Rio and asked if he would keep him company. After a short silence and no response, Abel waved his hand right in front of Rio's eyes to get his attention. Later in Rio's cabin, Abel apologizes for the abruptness and explains that it will be a job where he needs to transform into a guide. He adds that he will pay Rio and help him if he wants to try city life. Sweating, asks Abel, waiting for Rio's opinion. Rava agrees but says he can only leave the next morning. He still has matters to attend to. Abel is delighted and thanks Rio for agreeing to join. After washing the dishes from dinner, Rio tells April that he will step out briefly and return soon. When Abel asks in surprise where he is going so late, Rio leaves the cabin and explains that he must inform someone about his absence and asks to wait, it might take some time. While Abel responds, the scene switches. A headless knight and his horse are waiting for Rio. Rio unexpectedly announced that he will leave the forest tomorrow. This is their last training before his return. Night awaits and Rio raises that painful wound he received. Aiming this at the warrior, Rio gathered his courage and spoke to the knight, saying he wants this duel to be different, urging him to attack with full force. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders whom Rio went to inform if no one else was nearby. He assumes that Rio is alone now. Perhaps he came to the grave but did not start asking. Although Rio does not know where that Sea of the Moon is, he remembered it's far north and wonders himself why he said that. He thought that going alone would be difficult, especially when you do not know how big this forest is. In the end, Abel realized Rio is a mage without a staff, hardly strong in battle, so in the city he decided to find him clothes and help a little more. Exhausted and all sweaty, Rio stuck his sword into the ground and gasping, trains again with the headless knight. He does not notice how the knight extends something to him. Rio wonders what it is, but the proud knight stands silently. Later, Abel says he does not want to seem rude and that Rio does not have to answer if he does not want to. Abel asks where Rio went last night, and Rio, putting on a new hooded cloak, a farewell gift, explains that he informed his master about his upcoming adventure. Abel asks if the cloak has any special properties, and Rio admits that he does not know. Then the two of them set off to the forest, thus their journey began. Lansing returned to his hut, and Rio quietly says goodbye with a stone expression on his face. All morning they head north and do not meet a single monster. But by midday they encountered a little boar on their way. Abel instantly draws his sword, lunges into attack and accurately strikes the creature. The warrior swiftly attacks the small boar and the fight ends in a moment. Stunned, our hero looked at the warrior with wide-open eyes. Noticing his uncertainty, Rio explained which parts of Abel's body glow when he uses combat skills, and how his movements change at those moments. The warrior noted that such skills are typical for those who wield weapons, and advised looking for a suitable place for the camp. Twilight was already approaching. They recalled the large oak with a hollow they had passed. It would make a great shelter and the boar could be eaten once the camp was set up inside. Abel said he would rest first, but asked our hero to wait just in case he was needed. When he could rest, Rio sat thoughtfully in the camp and decided to practice magic control, as there was plenty of time. The night grew increasingly quiet and deep as hours passed. Later, Abel woke up and quietly told her hero to rest. He would stay on guard himself. While rinsing his throat, he managed to examine the rabbit our hero had caught. He questioned Rio's hunting methods, but had to admit they work. Watching the boy truly rest, Abel was convinced that the cloak was not of human make, and pondered about his mentor. He even thought that teacher Rio might be a spirit, but spirits do not give cloaks. It had to be a legendary creature, possibly a dragon, since the cloak's origin was clearly non-human. Shivering in the cold, he could brush off a fleeting thought. Soon our hero woke up, warmly greeted Abel, and they set off on the road again. Abel walked ahead with his sword at the ready, while Rio lagged behind, carefully studying the plants around. Suddenly, to the right of Abel, something crashed from the sky and they both flinched. Abel raised his sword. He felt the presence of an invisible enemy sneaking up. Looking up, they saw it was a killer eagle. Our hero warned Abel that the creature uses air magic to attack from long distances. The warrior suggested retreating, but Rio said a boar was chasing them and an unknown beast was lurking ahead. So escape was impossible. They began to suspect they had fallen into a trap. But our hero stubbornly insisted it was just a coincidence, noticing that the open field was the eagle's hunting ground. Rio suggested fighting in the clearing. He would take on the deadly eagle while Abel dealt with the boar. Worried, he warned that eagle strikes from the air could kill even an experienced warrior if he was not careful. Our hero and the ice mage said that his strength was defense, and noted that warriors find it difficult to deal with flying enemies. Abel agreed, stepped forward, and got ready for battle. When he charged, he shouted to Rio that he would return after defeating boar and asked him to stay alive. The hero managed to stay calm to avoid getting injured, then charged at the boar, confused by how Rio sent the beast away from a distance. Boar summons stones nearby and sends a magical hail of stones at Abel. And Abel, using combat skills, confidently dodges every attack. When he got close enough, he struck the boar with his sword. Then he pulled the blade out of the fallen creature. Exhausted, he dropped to his knees, stuck the sword into the ground and gasped heavily. He realized he was burning through his skills too quickly, and Fatty was covering him. But he knew he had to recover quickly to help Rio carrying Boar's body. He hurried back to where Rio was staring into the eyes of the killer eagle. Hebold was looking at the fallen killer eagle, and Rio stood nearby smiling at the defeated creature. Shocked, the warrior stared at Rio and asked if he really defeated the beast. Rio, smiling, confirmed this and added that other monsters ahead had fled. Abel dropped to his knees, surprised when Rio asked if he was injured. Looking over Rio's battlefield, Abe confidently said he was unharmed, just tired. He immediately asked, how did Rio dodge the killer eagle's strikes? He noted that dodging invisible air magical attacks relying only on sight is almost impossible. Meanwhile, Rio Curios asked permission to turn back and look him in the eyes. Abel turned to Rio. Suddenly he felt under his hand and touched a barely perceptible icy wall. Rio explained that the barrier was almost imperceptible and agreed himself. It was practically invisible. Abel realized that the deadly eagle had defeated itself by crashing into the almost invisible icy wall. He said he knew many air, fire, and earth mages, but recalled an old man who said that water mages do not fight, and now he knew that he was wrong. Smiling, Rio asked Abel what he meant. Abel quickly replied that it was nothing, just mumbling to himself. Both then turned their gazes back to the mountain. Eerie sounds were coming from there. They agreed to choose either the left or the right path to get out of the mountains, and Abel admitted that both paths seemed ominous. So he took out a coin and suggested, "Let fate decide." Heads meant left, tails meant right. Before Rio could respond, Abel flipped the coin. It fell into Abel's hand and showed heads, so they chose the left path. Abel noticed Rio's strange behavior and asked if something was wrong with the coin. Rio honestly admitted that he had never seen money before and asked to take a closer look at the coin. Abel agreed. Abel told about the coin economy of their world, and Rio, comparing it to 19th century Earth, asked how many countries there were, and Abel, straining his memory, named 3 great states: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Empire of Vi, and the Federation of Handel. While speaking, Abel felt something bad nearby, and with a heavy heart realized that they were in a stone golden nest. Rio said in surprise that he did not know that goblins had nests. Abel simply explained that nest was a word for a place with many goblins, and Rio asked in surprise if goblins were supposed to have human limbs. Counting, Abel pointed out that there were 12 of them, and running away would be unwise. Rio asked Abel if he could try a new magical attack, and Abel agreed. Rio stretched out his hand, focusing on his spell. Suddenly 10 huge icy walls collapsed on all the valleys. It thundered like an earthquake. With a mischievous smile, he instantly made it clear that this was a weapon of mass destruction. They cleared the area and noticed a large dark yellow magic stone. They noted that the value of such stones depends on size and color. Rio called the stone a good loot from the fight and told Abel that he could keep it. Abel, though somewhat skeptically, agreed to keep the magic stone as a reward. Meanwhile, Rio realized that his way of defeating the goblins did not work properly. Abel sincerely admitted, without Rio they probably would have perished. He did not even know how to collect magical stones, and Rio confirmed this. After some time, Rio noticed something on the right and immediately asked Abel what it was. Rio noticed that it resembled a giant hippopotamus. Abel identified it as a behemoth, and Rio jokingly asked if it was worth hunting. Rio calculated that the hippopotamus was too big even for his 10 ice walls, and Abel agreed, warning not to make any attempts against it. Rio became serious and asked Abel if he considered him crazy, to which Abel immediately replied yes. Then Rio noticed something in the distance. Some objects were flying towards them, and he thought they might be dragons. When they got closer, both suddenly realized, these are not dragons, these are weapons. Soon they noticed Viverny was not aiming at them but rushed at the giant. Rio, delighted, exclaimed that he had finally seen a battle of beasts. He noticed that the giant was surrounded by 6 wyverns. There were more of them than him. One wyvern screeched piercingly and struck the giant with a sharp gust of wind. Both heroes, stunned by the attack of the winged creatures, wondered how the giant would react. The immovable behemoth used stone magic and summoned huge boulders around itself as a shield. The wind attacks of the wyverns hit one of these stones and it completely stopped them. Flying creatures unleashed another wave of wind attacks, while the behemoth stood unharmed behind its stone barrier. Then the giant made huge stone walls to protect himself. Both the heroes and the bystanders gaped in astonishment. The eyes widened at the tall barriers surrounding the giant beast. Abel said he knew about giants but not their magic. Rio expected a fight, not a magical clash. The flickering wrapped around the walls and burst out with a fierce roar. Behemoth smashed his barriers and glared fiercely at the wyverns. Suddenly the wyverns and heroes noticed something strange. The wyverns seemed to have lost the ability to fly. They were falling and crashing around the giant. Rio wondered if the monster had paralyzed them, but he did not believe it. The giant roared again, the ground shook, and the wyverns flailed helplessly. Rio, recognizing the phenomenon, assumed it was the neutralization of magic. Abel, shocked, asked if such a thing was even possible, did not know a single person who could do it, let alone a monster. Rio insisted that he take a closer look. He noticed that the wyverns were struggling, trying to get up but could not, like in paralysis, when movement would be impossible. Abel was straining to draw blood from his eyes, but remembered that he had long heard about such traps and dungeons. Rio sparkled at the word dungeon and asked if there were rooms in the Kingdom of Mighty where magic does not work. Abel explained that the dungeon is in the western province, not in the kingdom itself. While the behemoth trampled the grounded wyverns, Abel asked Rio if he was interested in dungeons, and Rio gladly answered, yes. Has the giant already finished off the wyverns? Asked Abel, and added that Rio was lucky. The moon had the only dungeon in the central provinces, and Rhea remarked that Abel should have mentioned this earlier. But Abel immediately replied that he did not suspect that Rio loved dungeons so much. They moved away, discussing the terrible battle of beasts and imagining a fight between Abel and the behemoth. They noticed a wyvern, and instead of setting a trap, they ate a boar. He moved his hands, Focusing magic, he summoned huge icy spikes from the sky. They crashed down, hit the wyvern, and pinned it to the ground while Abel swiftly ran to its head. While they chatted, Rio suggested going hunting because there was very little food left. A small ice arrow hit a rabbit and pinned it to the mountainside. They began to ambush other scattered wyverns. After another victory, Rio felt that hunting was becoming easier, and Abel admitted that he was still amazed at how it could be so easy. Rio cut the meat and said it needed to be dried a bit before they moved on. He suggested taking the path nearby, but cautious Abel warned him, "Be ready." As soon as Abel spoke, they both looked to the left, and there, right at them, stared a giant monster resembling a ripon. They noticed that the griffin did not take its eyes off the meat of the rabbit tied to Rio's belt. Rio threw a piece to the monster, which greedily ate it. Rio noticed that something seemed to be starting. The cheerful griffin jumped up and threw the rabbit from the belt to the beast. The beast grabbed the food and flew away. Rio pointed to the road behind the place where Griffin was. Abel noticed the signpost and made sure it was the path, calling Rio to follow it. The Euro mounts south of the central province were famous as impassable. Even the bravest adventurers avoided them. Once the path had a different name, but now it is forgotten. Now they were called the Evil Mountains due to the invasion of orcs and ogres. This ridge had a bad reputation. Abel sighed deeply with relief, grateful that they survived in the mountains on the way to civilization. Rio asked if Abel was a ranked adventurer. Abel confirmed this and, interested, asked why Rio was asking. Rio admitted he hesitated to join the Adventurers Guild, and Abel explained that it frees him from tolls and city fees, and added that the guild card is like an ID that grants free entry to the city and better prices at the market. Rio smiled. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. Abel noted that the guild kept adventurers, their belongings and earnings safe. He explained that it was too risky to carry all their wealth with them. Stunned as if real and guilds the jars. In the city with tall buildings, he held a postcard in a small bag, recalling the questions he managed to ask. For example, whether he could withdraw money at other guild branches. Abel believed he only knew about the central provinces, but he noted that the guild was an independent organization in each country. Abel explained that during wars, states could hire the guild and adventurers as mercenaries. Rio thought that was cheaper than sending armies. Abel said that adventurers could agree or refuse such tasks, and admitted he was afraid the enemy would take everything from him, leaving him with nothing but the fight. Rio, irritated, wondered how governments could allow the guild to hold their money hostage. Pointing ahead, he noticed a city in the distance. Abel was almost certain that this was the city of Calamity, so they had entered the kingdom of Nightly, and he explained that Kaliti was the southeasternmost city of the kingdom, and a day's walk through Wrath East would take them to Luen, Abel's last stop. Abel advised Rio to register as an adventurer in Luen, not in Calamity, and Rio couldn't help but ask, why? Abel explained that Luen, the largest border city of the kingdom, attracts the most diverse people because of its unique dungeon. He added that if Rio made Luen his base, he would feel more at ease in cities. Local adventurers often get better perks. Rio agreed that it was logical but said he didn't have an entry card. Abel said that was not a problem. As a B-rank adventurer, he could sponsor Rio for just 1 silver coin. Rio expressed deep respect to Abel and put his hands together. Abel nodded that everything was fine and suggested spending the night in Kaleti so Rio could try the local dishes. At the Rio restaurant, he tasted something that seemed like curry with rice, and he couldn't get enough of its flavor. He couldn't stop constantly ordering new curries and dishes, eating almost all night, wandering and exploring the city. Rio asked Abel if Luna also had curry, and Abel replied that it was common in the south of the kingdom. Rio vowed to recreate the curry when he returned to the Rhonda forest. The next day, walking around the city, Rio asked Abel if people lived beyond its limits. Abe confirmed that villagers often did so, although they once lived inside. He noticed that the gates in Lyon were always open at night, unlike in Kaliti, where there were fewer patrols, and this made Rio doubt the safety of Lyon. Abe believed the fact that the Lunas were always larger guaranteed them safety. At the gates of Lunds, a guard called Abel by name but said his companion had to pay a fee, which Abel offered to pay. He rummaged through his bag looking for the required amount to hand over. Abel suggested heading straight to. They approached the guild and asked Rio if he really wanted to register. Rio confirmed he wanted to try the life of an adventurer, and Abel added that with him Rio could request a promotion. They explained that most adventurers start at F rank, but if a patron of B level or higher stands nearby, one can start at E or even D. Rio asked about the advantages of D rank, and Abel explained that it offers better tasks and bigger rewards. Rio inquired whether the magical stones of wyverns are valuable, and Abel replied that they are very valuable because wyverns are hard to defeat. He added that due to their rarity, these items are almost priceless, and selling Rio stock could destabilize the market. In the Adventurers Guild, Abel reassured Rio that the guild would handle it, so he shouldn't worry. When she entered, a young woman asked if Abel was really here. The man exclaimed in surprise at what he saw, and the large warrior behind froze, not believing that Abel was alive. The narrator said that B-rank adventurers are rare, and Abel led the Crimson Sword Squad, which included the priestess Rhea, the shield-bearer Warren, and the mage Lind. Riapaz felt that befriending Abel would be very beneficial because everyone admires him. Abel placed his hands on Rio's shoulders and introduced him to the group as the one who saved his life and enabled him to return safe and sound. He said that Rio would register as an adventurer and join them, asked everyone to kindly welcome the newcomer, and the group greeted Rio with warm smiles. Rio smiled, introduced himself, and happily greeted everyone. One man sincerely thanked him for saving Abel, and another said with interest that he would like to get to know him better. Abel approached a woman named Nine and asked if she could handle Rio's registration. She wanted to recommend him for D rank. Nine said she could manage it, but wanted proof whether Rio was truly worthy of D rank. Abel, anticipating this, had to consider that they might meet the guild master right now, and Nine believed that was possible. As they walked, Nine noted that the guild master had spent the whole day in his office with a pile of papers and was in a bad mood because of it. She said she would inform him of their arrival and asked them to wait in the hall. It relaxed on the sofa, while Rio kept standing waiting for their call. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud voice shouting, demanding to know what was going on. Steps were approaching, and a man entered the hall. Seeing Abel, he fell to his knees with relief. Abel apologized for scaring everyone so much but assured that he was alive, and the guild master admitted that he had lost hope when Abel disappeared. Pulling himself together, he asked about the mage, and Abel pointed to Rio, calling him the one who saved him. The man introduced himself as Human Glass Guild Master of the Lunes and sincerely thanked Rio for saving Abel. Rio waved his hand, saying it just happened he accidentally came across that warrior. He told the guild master that Rio wanted to join the guild and that he would like to recommend him for a rank promotion. The guild master noted that Abel's recommendation needed to be verified. Nine added that this was exactly why Abel wanted to meet with the guild master. She apologized and said she would be near the registration desk if needed. As she was leaving, the guild master settled into a chair and said that first he needed to ask a few questions. Abel stepped forward and said that Rio was stronger than him. Rio just raised an eyebrow and asked if it was really necessary to speak so sharply. The guild master did not hide his admiration for Abel's words, who continued to say that Rio was a funny clown, but when it came to work incredibly serious, and he placed magical stones collected from fallen monsters on the table. Abel proudly showed everyone the size and color of the stone. The guild master, surprised, recognized them as attribute magical stones due to the green tint and restrained himself from further comments. He noticed that they were large and dark and asked if they were from Waverings. Abel confirmed and added that Rio had as many stones as he did. The guild master, still stunned, asked how so many wyverns could be near the city and said that only all together could repel such an attack. Abel Condom explained that they hunted them south of the Evil Mountains. The master asked why they were here, and Abel told how their ship crashed, leaving them on land, from where they went to the mountains and came across a wyvern's nest. The guild master inquired whether Abel planned to use his connections to sell the stones without crashing the market, and Abel shyly confirmed. He said he could sell to different buyers, even kings, and get the money in 2 to 3 days. He proposed to split the profit equally, but Abel stubbornly wanted to take 40 and give Rio 60. Rio demanded an equal share, and Abel said he owed him for saving his life and helping him return alive. Rio tried to object, but the guild master sternly warned him do not disgrace Abel by refusing to share. Reluctantly, Rio agreed to the terms, taking 60 and leaving Abel 40. At the reception desk, Nine addressed someone who was clearly distracted and gently asked them to wait. In the corridor, the receptionist shouted for someone to stop. The matters were not yet resolved. Rio noticed something strange near the hall doors. A girl entered stunned. Her legs were trembling and she began to cry upon seeing Abel alive. Smiling, Abel apologized to Lin for making her worry. A priestess and a tall warrior entered, and Abel greeted them, loudly announcing his return. The priest did not hold back his emotions and sincerely congratulated him on his return. The guild master stood up, said they had much to discuss, and informed Nine and Rio that the papers were in his office. In the office, the guild master asked Rio to sit and ordered Nine to bring the papers to register Rio as an adventurer. Rio, hesitant, asked if he could really be a D rank. The master reassured him everything was fine and added, who wouldn't believe in those magical stones they brought. Rio, blushing with shame, noted that the last blows were dealt by Abel, not him. The guildmaster acknowledged Abel's skill but said that no warrior, no matter how talented, could defeat a wyvern alone, because it was Rio's strength that opened the gaps through which Abel won victories. So Rio clearly deserved the D rank. The guild leader jokingly tapped Rio on the shoulder, nodding in surprise. Who would have thought he was so fit for a mage? Rio explained that he trained physically to hunt alone in case magic ran out or he had to run away. The guild master understood and casually wished that more young people thought that way. Soon there was a knock on the office door, and the guild master invited her inside. Nain entered with a device resembling a crystal ball, explaining that it was for registration. He thanked her, gave papers, and ordered Rio to follow Nain's instructions so everything would go smoothly. Nain politely introduced herself to Rio as an employee of the Lun's Adventure Guild. Rio said it was nice to meet her and thanked her for her kindness. Sitting opposite him, Nain said she needed basic information and asked Rio to answer a few questions. She asked for his name, profession, and the trait related to the job. Rio answered everything flawlessly, except he got confused about his place of residence. Embarrassed, Rio admitted that he did not have housing, yet he had just arrived in Lun. Nain explained that after registration he could live in the guild dormitory for up to 300 days, so he would have plenty of time to settle in. She added that the dormitories helped new adventurers get acquainted. Rio could lead anytime during those 300 days if he wanted. Taking the paper from Nine, Rio Marvellet plunged into mysteries, noting the absence of printers but the impressive quantity and quality of copies, after which Nine asked if Rio had ever explored dungeons. And he said no. She told him about the monthly guild seminar on dungeons and about a bunch of free courses and trainings for novice adventurers. Nine suggested going to the seminar about dungeons, and Rio, full of enthusiasm, gladly agreed to come. Seeing his excitement, Nine smiled and said the seminar would start the day after tomorrow. She said it would last 5 days each day about a different topic, and insisted that he attend all sessions. She offered to fill out his form, and insisted that he come to the 3rd floor of the guild hall at 9 in the morning. Rhea wondered in surprise whether these time counts matched Earth's. Nine told him to check the tower on the square. She rang according to the schedule, even at 9 in the morning, as if confirming that the time here was the same as on Earth. She announced that the interview was over and only registration remained. Rio immediately asked what she meant. Nine pointed to the crystal ball and asked Rio to put his hand on it. Rio did so, and a voice confirmed his registration. Nine smiled, asked him to remove his hand and thanked him. Then one handed him a guild card, warning that replacing a damaged or lost card costs 1 gold coin, and Rio thanked her. Reading the card, Rio wondered if points could be earned with it. A moment later, a team of adventurers entered the guild master's office. All were smiling. Abel thanked the master for allowing him to use the lounge and said he was leaving. Luen announced a party at 6 in the evening at the Golden Wave to celebrate Abel's return, inviting Nine and Rio. Abel told Rio that he would have to come and be the guest of honor. Confused, Rio glanced at the group, and Abel explained that Golden Way was their usual inn. He had booked a room for Rio so he could drink freely, and insisted that refusal was impossible. A voice confirmed that registration was complete and asked if Rio had any questions. Abel and Iger eagerly offered to answer anything and encouraged Rio to set off. The priestess said she had prepared lodging at the inn, and Abel jokingly told the guildmaster that he was taking Rio. Rio sincerely thanked Nine and the guildmaster for their help. Nine declared him an official crazy adventurer, and when he thanked her again, said she was returning to the reception desk. When everyone dispersed, Guildmaster Nelt exclaimed that he was so happy he could cry. He recalled the chaos when Abel disappeared and thanked for his safe return. The Guildmaster, still in disbelief, imagined how Abel survived in the evil mountains after the shipwreck, and could not comprehend what horror it must have been. He decided that Abel no longer needed to snoop around smugglers, and vowed not to send him on water or sea missions. To himself, he again thanked Rio for bringing Abel back alive. He could not imagine what he would have done otherwise. Approaching the book-filled cabinet, the guildmaster thought it was worth informing someone about the security. He grabbed a device resembling a phone from the shelf. Meanwhile, Rio and Abel are walking through the streets of Lyon, and Abel promises to thank Rio for the rescue to buy him clothes and a staff. Abel noticed that Rio might like his leather suit and sandals, but promised to choose something in his own style. Rio said Abel didn't need to worry so much. New leather clothing was inappropriate in the city. He did not cling to his forest rags and gladly wore everything that Abel gave. Abe told Rio that he could choose both simple and fancy clothes. While they were walking, Rio asked in surprise why he needed a staff when they were buying clothes. They doubted whether Magum really needed one. From the fitting room, Rio explained that he did not need a wand to perform magic. Hybel noted that the wand enhances magical power and asked how strong Rio could become with it. Still changing clothes, Rio resolutely said he would never use a wand and relies on his sword in close combat. Surprised, Abel asked whether Rio really knew how to wield a sword, or if he meant that crude iron thing he carried with him and not a real blade. Rio wondered, hadn't he already talked about this with Abel? He remembered how, leaving the shop, he said that as a wind mage he would rush at the enemy's if hinting at a sword. Hybel asked again if Rio wanted a staff, and Rio calmly replied that he did not need it. Rio added that the staff was not for him and he already had a sword. Abel agreed but noted that Rio's weapon was not a real sword. Puzzled, Rio drew his blade and insisted that it was a sword, and Abel asked if he really called it a sword, because he thought it was just a dagger. Rio said the real problem was a lack of knowledge about the world. Abel asked why, and Rio admitted he didn't even know basic things like units of measurement or how long a day lasts. Abel remarked that he always thought Rio was strange, but never imagined he lacked everyday knowledge. He realized that admitting you know nothing is true wisdom. He said that acknowledging ignorance is smart and began to explain the simplest basics of the world. Rio was advised not to learn everything at once, but he caught everything on the fly and everyone began to wonder if this boy was a genius. Abel suggested moving on. They were about to reach the tavern Golden Wave and warned Rio that he was not yet ready to drink. The next morning in Luni, Rio and Val hungover. His head was buzzing with pain, and he remembered how someone carried him to the room last night. Rio's hangover and memories of abuse explained why he looked so broken after last night. In the tavern, people raised their mugs and joyfully celebrated that Abel had returned unharmed. Rio allowed himself a drink and quietly smiled, praising the tasty drinks and perfect food. Climbing the stairs, Rio suddenly remembered an old poem about tall grass that endures the dreams of mighty warriors. In the common hall of the Rio Tavern, he sat, still hungover, and bowed his head. A woman named Lenny passed by, smiled, wished him good morning, and said that breakfast would be ready soon, inviting him to sit anywhere. Rio thanked her and approached to ask one more question. He inquired about the bill for last night, recalled that he had moved into the guild housing, but Lenny assured him that Abel had already paid everything. Surprised, Rio thought about Abel's generosity and believed, whoever pays for others is a true exception. Soon he visited the guild headquarters and informed Nine that he wanted to take advantage of the housing offer. Nine warmly welcomed him, asked how she could help, and Rio curiously asked to tell him more about the guild dormitory. Nine said that about 30 people currently lived there, but some were in the dungeon and not everyone came daily, so the place remained lively. She immediately noticed that 6 people lived in each room, and there was one common room for everyone. No one else was waiting, so she offered to show him everything around. They walked and she quietly hoped that he enjoyed the party, noticing how everyone was leaving in high spirits. Rio admitted that he had drunk too much, and Nine advised a detox potion from the guild shop to get rid of the hangover. Rio was surprised. He did not imagine that a potion could do that. He asked about the housing rules, and Nine said that residents could freely come and go, use the rooms, shared bathrooms, and kitchen. She added that there were no caretakers among the residents and everyone managed themselves. Impressed honestly, a true one among all the caretakers who had ever been, and Nine said yes, calling it a long story. Now only the cleaning was given to another company. She said that the former adventurer ran a cleaning business in Lyon, and Rio smiled. Apparently, that's how adventurers live when they retire. Nine told Rio that he would share room 10 with Nils and Edo, who were in the dungeon. In room 10, Nine poked at the door signs and, smiling, said that the sign was ready for him and she would hang it up. Although Rio hesitated, he agreed and watched as Nine placed her sign by the door. 3 signs for the room's residents were already hanging on the door, and there was still space for 2 more. At first, nothing could be heard from below, but then someone burst in loudly. Nine looked out and confirmed. Both were there. She left the room together with Rio, smiling and kindly introducing herself as the guild receptionist. It was announced Nils and Edo had returned. The shirtless boy, embarrassed, greeted the 9 and they replied hello. 9 said the time was just right. She was going to introduce Rio and asked them to look after him. Rio briefly introduced himself, and the girl was clearly not thrilled about the new roommate. The boy quickly introduced himself as Nils and, waving at the girl, said she was Edo. Both happily met Rio, and 9 said she would return to the registration desk and reminded Rio not to be late for tomorrow's seminar, as it would be easy, he would be resting there. When 9 left, Nils put on his shirt and Edo, still not dressed, gave him a stern look. Nils remarked that Nis 9 was simply amazing and Edo waved it off. Relax, everyone adores receptionists. But he had no chance. Offended Nils exclaimed that every man dreams of marrying one after gaming fame, and Edo cut in that those women were meant for nobility, not ordinary adventurers. Meanwhile, Edo told Rio that they could formally be roommates and admitted she was worried about who would move in with them. The arrival of a new person was inevitable, and he sighed with relief it was Rio. Nils agreed and said he hated sharing a room with someone like Dan from room 1. Rio is a little worried. He noticed that a clash of characters could cause problems. Nils explained that he is a swordsman and Edo is a priestess, then asked about Rio, assuming he is a mage. Looking at Nell, it became clear he is a true mage. Nils said he heard that 9 was discussing the seminar and asked if Rhea would come. Rhea replied that he would attend all 5 days, and Nils added that the seminar saved his life. Later, no one came to the door of room 10, and 9 people entered together with a newcomer who would stay in the dormitory. The boy said, "I am a man." Nils stepped forward, introduced himself, and said that the others were Rio and Edo. 9 informed that some man would also come to the seminar, suggested that he and Rio go together, then said goodbye and left. Nils, enchanted, enthusiastically noted 9's beauty, and Edo, saying, "I am a man," noticed that he looked young and asked if he was an adult. The man confessed. He was only 16, but after the death of his family, he became an adventurer to survive. Nils said that everyone was in a similar situation and was glad that this man and Rio ended up at the same seminar. Rio told the man that during those 5 days they would learn a lot, and Nils and Edo said they were returning to the dungeon and wished them luck at the seminar. Somewhere in another corner, Lin was shouting at Abel, insisting that it was impossible, and Abel replied that he hated bringing bad news but it was possible. Lin said she knew the ice wall spell but insisted. Summoning it just in the air to collapse on enemies was impossible. No element can create magical effects from afar, only around the one who summons them. Companion Len's II said that she was exaggerating and believed Abel's story. Lin addressed her, insisting that her logic was sound, and accused her of siding with Abel only out of sympathy. Rhea agreed that even light mages could only heal allies nearby and noted how useful remote healing would be. Abel insisted that he was just telling what happened, explaining how they pulled the yellow magic stone from the bile, and his comrades Eni Stone asked what he was going to do with such a big stone. Abel said he could sell it, but sharing the profit would become difficult if Rio was remembered. Everything would get complicated. And he added that the mere fact of Rio's record in Luen did not make him loyal to the knightly kingdom, as others might try to recruit him for their domains. Linda Grid said that if even half of Abel's words about Rio were true, then Rio was a real miracle. Abel was outraged because he realized that his friends did not believe him, but still noted that Rio could leave Luen and go to another city. Rhea said that this would deprive Luen and thus the knightly kingdom of a key resource. She added that if Rhea joined the Empire, it would be a disaster, but Abel replied that Rhea would not do that because the Empire did not suit him. Rhea asked what he meant. Lin noticed that the Empire was the only rival of the kingdom, and Abel explained that Rhea considered the Empire's name uncool. So he did not like it. He would never go there. Embarrassed, they changed the subject again, excusing themselves that they only took ordinary tasks they could not refuse because they avoided dungeons. Abel sincerely thanked his friends for trying so hard. Rio was genuinely glad about his safe return, and they divided the reward into 4, asking him later to check his share. Surprised, Abel shouted to his friends, "Wait." When he realized what was going on, he was outraged that including him was unfair because he was not there, and suggested dividing it among 3, but the friends refused. That was how they did it. Abel suddenly remembered. He also earned money, and all those magic stones taken from the defeated monsters along the way simply did not fit. Abel said that he gave the magic stones to the guild leader for sale, so that later the proceeds could be shared among friends. Stunned, they asked how he managed to get so many stones. Lin could not shake the doubt whether Abel was helping some other group. He firmly denied it and reminded that he had already spoken about the Wyverns and the south of the Evil Mountains. They defeated them to reach Luen, because leaving them was too risky. Lin was still in shock and clarified that Abel and Rio defeated the Wyverns. Abel himself confirmed this. He told how Rio threw ice spears at their wings and then hit them in the eyes as they fell. Lynch could not understand why Rio aimed at the Wyverns' wings with ice spears. It was again noticed that the Wyverns surrounded themselves with air barriers, and this confirmed their tactic worked. Lin said that even Master Hilarion would not have coped with such powerful magic, and again added that she knew only one person whose magic could match it. Abel recalled the hellish mage from the Empire, the legendary one who supposedly turned 1,000 kingdom soldiers to ashes with a single strike. Rumors whispered that he felled a wyvern with one blow and crushed a squad of rebels who barricaded themselves in the city. Smiling, Abel admitted that he would never want to meet the hellish mage in battle. More seriously, Abel added, he also would not want to fight Rio. Images surfaced in his memory of how he cast magic without chances, pronouncing invented, cool-sounding names that suited his character so well. And combined with quiet, lightning-fast spells, Rio's abilities were truly formidable. Abel confessed that standing before Rio's ice wall, he was not sure even at full strength with an enhanced strike, he might not break through it. Rio could also launch ice spears from behind the wall, and Abel could not come up with any strategy to win. Especially after Rio's words when he reached Luen. He remembered how Rio took a stance with a sword and declared that he could fight up close. The very thought tired Abel, and he said that it was not funny at all. He could not imagine defeating Rio even with magic. Rio's skill in hand-to-hand combat made him a true anomaly. Next to the native era of the Empire. If you liked this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm your host. See you next time. Goodbye. People quickly realized having a mage as an enemy is a bad idea. On the 5th day of the beginner seminar in the dungeon, someone pushed Rio and he asked his question. Rio thanked them and hopefully asked if there was any teleport that allows returning to the last past floor of the dungeon. Everyone was petrified with amazement, looking at Rio, who stood with his mouth open. The instructor praised Rio for his knowledge and confirmed that in some dungeons there really are such mechanisms. He sighed and explained that in the Luen dungeon this feature does not exist, and in others the research simply resumes from the place where it was interrupted. He honestly admitted that he did not know the technical details, and Rio thanked him and said that everything was fine. After the seminar, a man with a gloomy, angry expression on his face was walking ahead of Rio. Rio was sure he guessed right. There really was no teleportation in the Luna dungeon, and this pleased him. The man, impressed, said so, but Rio, a bit shy, waved it off and called it just a minor curiosity. Suddenly the gates clanged loudly and opened, revealing a fortified room with iron bars. The instructor explained that monsters break out every few years, so these bars prevent them from breaking into the city. He described the double gates, saying that names, dates, and entry times were recorded, and those who did not return were considered missing. The instructor confirmed that he had noted the names of all the students, and their entry times their arrival was now officially recorded. Rio noticed something strange nearby. The swamp was trembling, and seeing that the man was nervous, he told him to calm down. Rio approached closer and advised deep breathing, and Aman said that after this he felt a little better. Although Aman was still pale, Rio reassured him that everything would be fine because they were together. They stepped over the gates and descended the dark stairs into the dungeon. The man's wallet hardened and began to descend. Reaching the first floor, someone noticed, "This place is just huge." The instructor warned, "Only weak monsters wander on the first floor, so it is safe to explore. But if you do not return within 2 hours, you will be considered missing and temporarily not allowed back." Side by side, Rio and the man marched forward resolutely, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, Rio sends gifts, and Ammon was gripped by panic. Rio calmly said that there was 1 minute left to the target, planning to freeze her with ice magic so the man could strike with his sword. He assured the man that they would be safe if they stopped this creature before it struck. Advancing deeper into the dim cave, they heard a noise. A soldier appeared, whom Ray recognized from the book. The beast lunged forward but stopped right in front of the heroes. Rio noticed that it did not spit acid, so the best option was to flank it and hit it in the head. The man nodded, understood, and prepared to step aside. Looking at Rio, the man vowed to do everything in his power. Rio began to cast ice magic, announcing the start of the attack. He extended his hand and spoke his spell. Above the soldier's armor, water bubbles suddenly appeared, and at that moment, ice was summoned again to strike. Countless icy spears fall like rain, pinning the creature to the ground. At the same time, Rio shouted to Almond to go around the ant from the side and cut off its head. The man agreed and instantly rushed straight toward the creature. With a single lightning-fast strike, the swordsman cut off the ant's head. Rio raised her hands in victory and celebrated, while Ammon stood bewildered by what had just happened. The moon froze in shock, looking at the defeated soldier Hunt, and shouted to Rio that he had done it. Rio praised him, saying he did wonderfully. Approaching the man, Rio offered to take the magical ant stone to mark his first victory in the dungeon. The man asked skeptically if Rio was sure, and Rio confirmed, explaining that this is how adventurers receive rewards in dungeons. Almant said he would remember this, and asked if they should return to the meeting place. Rail explained that slugs will eat the fallen beasts, clean the dungeon, and believe that success breeds confidence. Both raise their fists and joyfully celebrate the victory over the soldier ant in their first dungeon expedition. The man noted that he dealt the final blow only because Rio restrained the beast, and Rio smiled and praised his swordsmanship, asking him not to be so modest. Nils interrupted and said it doesn't matter who did what, the main thing is to celebrate. After eating and drinking, Edo and Nils said that their team would explore the dungeon for the next 2 days and asked what plans the guys had. A month said he wanted to continue exploring and would gather groups to join, wondering if it was easy to find willing companions. He seemed embarrassed by the thought of joining with strangers, while Rio quietly pondered something. Then Rio turned to the man and suggested forming a party to explore the dungeon down to the 3rd floor. Frilled instantly and gladly agreed to join Rio. Strange, why are there suddenly ants on the 1st floor where bats usually live? Nils said he had already encountered them there before. Ado suddenly remembered. For 6 months, messages about ants on the 1st floor had been coming to GIL. The reports confirmed ants on the 1st and 2nd floors of the dungeon. Nils wondered why this happened. Ado recalled that this had happened to them before and noted that the dungeon has not yet been mapped. Abe approached the table where the group was chatting and explained that the ants appeared because they dug tunnel snow. It was easier to move between floors. Rio T at the table said it was not nice when a veteran fools newcomers. Abel insisted that he was simply answering honestly. Abel, having asked if they were Rio's neighbors, introduced himself and jokingly said that Rio was tough but had strange habits. Rio replied that if Abel was trying to provoke him with such nonsense, he would bite, while Nils meanwhile wondered if Abel's name seemed familiar to him. Nils suddenly remembered that Abel is the Red Sword, stood up, introduced himself as a swordsman, and eagerly asked to shake his hand. Abel agreed, encouraged Nils, try hard but survive first, and then shook his hand. Rio watched and thought about how effortlessly Abel shared wisdom, shook hands with others, and wondered if that was why he was so loved. Abel remembered that the last mission kept him away, and he had only recently returned. Lynn noticed Abel and shouted sharply that she had found his hiding place. Ray reminded him that he needed to go report to the Harvest Master. Irritated, Abel said sharply that he was not hiding, he was just helping the newcomers. Lynn apologized to Rio, said she had to take Abel, and asked Warren to grab him. Warren reached out to Abel, but Abel sharply replied that he could walk on his own. Lynn apologized again, explaining that they had guild business, and Rio waved it off and said it was all right. In the background, Warren saw Abel pulling him away, and Abel shouted that Rio was a traitor. ordered Warren to stop ignoring him and let him go. Everyone at the table gaped at the chaos, and Rio just smiled. The man called it a wonderful show. Nils's eyes shone. With the exclamation, "What an amazing Abel." In the Luen's dungeon on the first floor, double protective grates caught the eye. Descending to the second floor, torches illuminated the walls. Rio ordered his ice spears launched an attack, pressing the beasts down to the very ground from below. The man drew his sword to attack the immobilized creatures. He brought the torch closer to the fallen beasts, and Rio followed behind. Rio praised the man's excellent work, and the moon thanked him. Rio proposed an idea for the next fight for a man to go one-on-one against a beast. He said that an uninjured opponent is stronger, so he would only wound the wolf's front paws. The man agreed to the plan. The man asked Rio if he was sure about it. Rio was surprised. The man thanked him for training with him but still asked if that would be enough. Rio reassured him don't worry and noted that the man's fighting style reminded him of Abel's. He asked if the man had learned from someone in his village. Surprised by the comparison, the man answered, yes. The man said he had studied under a former adventurer from their village, whom he called Grandpa Akiro. He had studied at a famous martial arts school and worked hard on his farm. He apologized, saying that was all he could remember. Rio said that true strength grows from deep foundations just like with Abel. As they walked on the second floor of the dungeon, one man asked in surprise how Rio, a mage, could know so much about martial arts. Recalling training with a legendary mentor, Rio admitted that the teacher guided him but had his own approach, so his knowledge was limited. The man looked admiringly and could not believe that Rio could be both a swordsman and a mage at the same time. And then you notice Rio did not always have a sword. Rio drew his blade and showed it to the man. The swordsman froze in amazement. In the dim light of the dungeon, it barely glowed. He asked about it, and Rio explained that his master had given him a sword created for users of water magic. Examining the blade, the man realized it was made of ice and noted that only a water mage could wield it. He said he had never seen anything like it and noticed two smaller wolves approaching. The man stood ready for battle, and the wolves sensed them and charged as a pair. Rio said he had won the hind legs of one wolf so the man could strike. He released a stream of water and two tiny ice spears directly at the wolves. One wolf was struck by the powerful stream, and the other was hit by spears on the hind legs. The wolves retreated, recovering, but the wounded one, bleeding and gasping, glared fiercely at the man. The man caught the gaze of the wounded wolf, advancing in a fighting stance. Rio watches closely as they face each other. He noticed that the man's style left no openings, but he worried about his endurance. Rael believed that Tima Minor could be trained, a thing a person can develop. Rio suddenly realized, since he left the Rondel forest, he had not once trained to run while simultaneously focusing on magic. Out of breath, the man shouted that he had defeated the wolf, and Rio, smiling, greeted him. Rio instantly created an ice barrier, stretching in all directions from floor to ceiling to protect them. He explained that the ice barrier was so strong that the beasts could not break through it, so they could rest. The man fell, breathing heavily but relieved. He was told once again not to rush and not to overexert himself, and was given water. Relaxing a little, the man noted that the barrier was so thin it was almost transparent. Rial explained that impurities in the water and air make the ice cloudy as people expected. He said that pure water can create transparent ice without magic, but this barrier used magic. The man enthusiastically praised the wonders of water magic, while Rio thought that this enhanced the reputation of the water mage. The man admitted he did not think fighting moving opponents was so exhausting. And Rio asked whether he had ever fought monsters. The man admitted he only fought monsters in groups, several people against one creature. Rio said that solar battles are much more intense than group skirmishes. Rio noticed that man's fighting style quickly exhausted him. He suggested refining the technique to get injured less often and work more on endurance. He said run so that endurance grows, and practice strikes so that the hands and shoulders become stronger. Hemin explained that his master ordered him to practice certain exercises and stances daily. Rio replied that only consistent discipline and adherence to these exercises would bring noticeable progress. He says that he walked alongside Abel for a long time and notes. Although Abel had natural talent, he still got up very early every morning to train. The man, surprised and impressed, cannot believe that even a prodigy like Abel dedicates himself to daily practice. The discouraged man admits that maybe he lacks the talent to become a swordsman. Rio recounts the wisdom of the strongest champion he knows. He once said that talent is the ability not to give up, and persistence forges true strength. Then he challenges the man, will you continue or give up? Full of determination, the man answers, I will not give up, I will only move forward. The next morning, as the sun was rising, Rio squatted by the bed in room 10, all the other beds were empty. Outside, a man can be seen running, gasping for breath and covered in sweat. Hito and Nils watch from afar as the man continues training outdoors. The boy asks the girl if they will also have to run, and she says yes. Rio, having finished preparing, approached the door. He notices that they are heading outside. Please, thanks to their dedication, he happily hums. Then the bag was heavily slapped on the table, and someone says that this should be enough. Nana mentions has an impressive collection of books and asks which books someone wants to buy. Rio, the hero, became interested in books on alchemy. Luna has two libraries, one in the north, the other in the south, and the southern one is closer to the Adventurers Guild and has more books for beginners. In the bookstore lie 3 books that caught Rio's eye, but they are only sold here. Borrowing is not allowed. Rio could not take his eyes off the book of alchemical recipes, but it cost 10 gold coins and he had only 5. Remembering the magic stones he obtained by defeating wyverns, he decides to return to the guild. Happily humming, Rio strolls through the streets, pleased that the magic stones sold for a good price, but he thinks that money does not come easily, one must work. Just the thought that you don't have to work for money causes incredible satisfaction. Suddenly Rio feels something strange and she looks devastated. Everyone on the street froze and is watching the stunning solar eclipse unfolding in awe. Rio is amazed he didn't even know such phenomena existed in this world, while the sun keeps darkening and someone nearby loudly asks what is happening. Suddenly Rio feels an unexpected shift and stops standing frozen in the middle of the street. He wonders if he has been thrown into some void or something similar in this fantasy world. As if everything around disappeared and he was left completely alone in the void. Rio understands that any movement can alert those around, so he chooses a single step and exhales. His breath curls in the air. Using his magic, he manipulates moisture, creating an effect similar to sonar. The moisture then reveals something nearby. The spotted figure is human height, but something about it is slightly off. Rio rushes into attack and summons a powerful ice barrier with 10 layers. 10 huge ice walls suddenly grew before him. Suddenly a voice echoed in his head asking if he is really human. Rio understood what broke through his icy barrier must be incredibly formidable. Underwide, the voice sounded so close. The voice sounded again, praising Rio as an impressive individual. Rio froze in place, using his sonar to anticipate what would happen. The source of the voice turned out to be a female demon with a curve. Someone enthusiastically praised the power of Rio's ice magic, calling it formidable. Rio imagined her and wondered if she was an Akuma. A huge wave of fire rushed at him, roaring louder and louder. He doubted whether he could stop it. Rio summoned an ice wall to take cover while the woman smiled and released her magic. After a few seconds, Rio held his breath. Was the attack already over? His barrier shattered into pieces, and he even shuddered from surprise. And the air spear rushed straight into his heart. Struck him so hard that he flew several meters. Rio came to, thinking it had almost happened. The woman approached him, looking at him, and noticed that her air spear did not pierce Rio. She noticed his cloak, probably of the fairy king, which might have saved him, but he was defending well anyway. She said she had to kill him with her own hands, thus showing her intention. Rio swiftly drew his sword with incredible speed. She appeared before him, her sword raised for a deadly strike. Rio barely managed to dodge. There was almost no time to react when she attacked again. The swords clashed fiercely, and the woman, smiling, skillfully parried Rio's blows. During their duel, both simultaneously cast spells. Their powers collided, an explosion burst forth and threw them back. The attack stopped. The woman took a moment to praise Rio's for his lightning-fast magic, calling him a monster. Rio retorted that she better not call him that. When she saw he understood her, she admitted he was extremely dangerous. After another explosion, Akuma swore to kill him and charged again into the sword duel. Rio wondered if she had already tried to kill him. In the heat of the fight, he summoned an ice spear and threw it at her side. The woman easily deflected the spear aside. But Rio at that moment summoned numerous ice spears around herself in vain. They silently looked at each other while the fog from his water magic slowly dissipated. She looked mockingly at Rio and asked, "Is that all you have?" And he replied that it was by no means so. Rio unleashed an unrelenting barrage of ice spears at Akuma. Then she released corrosive streams of water. She raised a barrier to block the attacks, using all of his water magic. Rio summoned rain that soaked the entire city and poured down on Akuma. The woman was glad that the one blocking Rio's attack stood under the rain. She felt something wrong in the falling water just as Rio whispered, "Boil." Akuma howled in agony as the rain boiled on her skin and burned her flesh. She screamed, focusing on her counterattack. Around Akuma, a huge explosion thundered, forcing Rio to retreat so as not to be caught. Gasping and exhausted, Rio looked at Akuma, and the woman said her time was up and added that she hadn't enjoyed a fight like this in a long time. And Rio demands that she leave. And she, watching him recover, smiles and says that Rio also enjoys the fight and admits she cannot control the space created by the eclipse. Rio looked at her tiredly. She introduced herself as Lena Eureka Albuquerque and asked his name. But he called her Akuma. In shock, she said she should have destroyed him even on her last breath just for knowing her true face. Calling herself Leonora, she said there was little time and he was not so easy to defeat, said goodbye to him and promised me once again. Rio, clearly against the reunion, boarded that plane to her. Leonora told him to stop, warned that his power would make him meet her or similar enemies more than once, and begged him not to die by others' hands. He swore that next time, becoming stronger than before, he would kill him and said goodbye to Rio. As if waking up, Rio returned to the same place in the city where he was before the void. He doubted whether he had really returned and found a bench, and he sat down to comprehend what had happened. Exhaling with relief, he realized he had survived. He recalled how he had nearly died from a deadly eagle that neutralized magic. Unlike that clash, Leonora effortlessly dodged and shattered his icy spears. A sudden pain in his chest reminded him of her strike with the air spear, and he thought he was wounded. He gratefully thanked his master for the cloak, confident that it had saved him from a severe wound, although the cloak was completely unharmed. He touched the painful spot and immediately regretted it. Reflecting on Leonora's attacks, he wondered, wasn't it magic such immense power and her lightning-fast strikes? As if using air magic for speed, he noticed her words, "Time is running out." It seemed to be connected with the solar eclipse. They realized that the battlefield existed only then and harmed only them, while the city was unharmed. He admitted that many aspects of that event confused him. Wasting no time, Rio decided to buy a book on alchemy, return to his room, and engage in research in comas. Even his mentor knew nothing about them. He recalled how he asked Abel he only knew about demons, not about Akam, and even if Abel, possibly the third son of some noble family, was not aware, finding answers would be difficult. Rio stood up and firmly decided to buy a book and head to the dormitory. Later they found themselves in an empty room. He wondered if his roommates were still training. Nils, out of breath, boasted about the Florida heat in front of everyone, if only he were not so tired. A group of 5 mocked him, saying nothing compares to the cry of a defeated dog. In response, a sneer was heard. Funny to hear that from ambushers. One man asked if they really thought monsters would warn them or stop when they retreated. He insisted that they must always be on alert. Nearby, Rio noticed something strange to the left. A man approached Nils and warned him that he should be grateful the fight was not real. Nils cursed at him, but Rio only remarked, "Whoever lowers their guard is to blame for everything themselves." Suddenly, spears shot out of the ground, aiming straight at the backs of the men. The man next to Nils noticed that his friends were being beaten. He stepped forward, directly into the eyes of the man who wanted to know what had happened, and frankly admitted, he hit the friends from behind with ice spears. The man tried to curse Rio, but Rio sharply interrupted him and said, "Vigilance must never be lowered." He sarcastically asked if he now also had to warn before an attack, since that man told Nils about the monsters. Rio stated that this was the result of their negligence. Nils grumbled that such a situation annoyed him. Noticing that they ran every morning and would now switch to weekends to save energy, Rio addressed the man who was still standing confused. Nils pointed at him and said that this was Dan for room 4. Having recognized Dan, Rio asked what he would do next. The friends were stunned so Dan could escape from shame. Instead, Dan drew his sword and swore not to retreat, and rush into the attack without hesitation. Rio sharply jumped aside and struck Dan's ribs with the hilt of his sword. Dan curled up in pain and Rio returned to the friends. Through the armor, Rio had dealt more damage to Dan with his fists, but the hilt still caused serious harm. He remembered that he had almost died before, guessed that the adrenaline from that fight had not yet left him, and asked Edo to heal his wounds, showing her the bruise from the battle with the Akumo. Edo looked at the wound. It looked serious, but said that the bones were not broken. The blow was brutal. She said that if the blow had landed closer to his heart, it could have killed him and no healing spell would have saved him. Rhea said that this is what it looks like when you barely survive. She was just grateful to be alive. When Edo asked what he was fighting for, Rio smiled and promised to share another time. Den was still doubled over in pain after Rio's blow, very close by. Rhea recalled how Leonora had previously cornered her, and now she easily defeats adventurers of her rank. What a contrast in Serda. Later in that bad house, Nils thanked Rio. He said he had come just in time and thereby saved them from humiliation. The man noted that the real thing for a mage moves quickly. Rhea replied, "Modern mages know how to do that." Nils grumbled for him to stop teasing the man, and the group burst out laughing, finally relaxing in the bath. In the central province of the Kingdom of Nightly on the southern border stood its largest city, Luen, and the Adventurers Guild dining hall. Nils said that he, one man, and Edo are going to gather a group for the dungeon tomorrow. Invited Rio. She, apologizing, refused. Rio passionately explained the plans of the city leader. Nils just smiled. He is not surprised. The fact that Rio immediately got D rank and quickly defeated Den only confirmed his roommate's suspicions about the huge difference in strength. Going to the dungeon was easier with strong adventurers, but this pressured both the strong and those who were weaker. The guild advised assembling teams of the same level. Rio was an exception, a foreigner who started much stronger than usual beginners. Even the guild did not expect someone like him to end up in the dormitory. The next day, on Monday, his friends finally said a real goodbye and set off to the dungeon. The real plan to hone control over magic and endurance by running around the walls of the city of Loans. He remembered how Leonora's powerful spells surpassed his, even though he cast them faster. He aimed to cast spells faster and more accurately, strengthened his strong points, and diligently trained his weak ones until they too became his strength. Despite this, he felt that Leonora were much faster physically. He remembered how she instantly covered dozens of meters, probably thanks to wind magic. Rio wondered whether to replicate this with water magic. He examined the water jets from the feet, but needed to find a way to move from the back without getting hurt. He considered maybe release a jet from the neck or along the entire back and freeze the ground to slide forward. He estimated that he could now handle 256 water jets. Testing his idea, Rhea released a powerful jet of water from his back, but everything went not as he hoped. And he fell, surrendering before someone or something. He thought he was not ready yet, but managed to handle 10 24 jet planes, and that gave him hope. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Nils told Edo that hunting goes faster with another swordsman, especially against goblins, who said the huge one were lighter than wolves due to their slowness. Nils suggested taking a break and licking salt, washing it down with water. The man remembered they talked about salt yesterday but could not recall in what context. This had nothing to do with performances or healing magic. Nils explained that it was a rural tradition to recover after sweating. Edo, worried about Amon's wounds, joined Nils and sat down to rest, feeling that the fight had been very close. Nils noted that goblin archers should not be on the 5th floor, and this made him hesitate whether to move further. Adu agreed, decided to return earlier and happily noted. They gathered more than usual and also shared among 3. In the Adventurers Guild Hall, Neil shyly greeted 9. She asked if they finished early and he stammered embarrassedly in response. Neil confirmed it and began showering 9 with compliments, but Edo interrupted him. Explain 9, they returned earlier because on the 5th floor a goblin archer showed her a magic stone. 9, carefully examining it, confirmed that it was from the goblin archer. 9 said she would inform the guild master and record it in the books. Such reports are almost never. Nils tried again to talk to 9, but Edo interrupted him, saying they needed to sell their magic stones while the guild master dealt with the paperwork. But he did not come and he invited the visitor inside. 9 rushed into the hall and reported about the goblin archer on the 5th floor. The guild master froze, was silent for a moment, and asked her to repeat. He said that the archer should only appear from the 10th floor, and 9 confirmed this. Then he shouted to the sign and asked which venture groups of level B exist in Luen. 9 listed the Crimson Swords and the White Brigade, and when the guild master inquired about the Phelps Brigade, she confirmed they returned 2 days ago and stayed in the city, and he ordered her to ensure both groups were in the guild within an hour. Abel even admitted that they called the White Brigade and he has a hard time with them, and Rhea asked how he could say that they have been friends since childhood. Lynn angrily remarked that Abe constantly complains and sometimes should learn to be silent from Warren. The Crimson Swords reached the guild master's door, knocked, and were invited inside. When they entered, Felt, captain of the Highlands and vice-captain of the White Brigade, greeted Abel. Hevel responded to the greeting, but immediately felt that his tension was noticed. The guildmaster said that they probably already knew why they were summoned, thanked them for coming, and explained that the matter concerned goblin archers on the 5th floor. When asked how sure he was about this, he replied that he was completely sure. He pulled out a magical stone of a goblin archer, and with a spark in his voice, told about 3 adventures of Frank, including a story about the archer and how he repelled the goblins on the 5th floor. Abel said that this was encouraging an F-rank group involving the archer defeated the goblins, and the guildmaster clarified that it was Nils's group and praised Nils as a prudent adventurer. With a bright future in mind, Abel asked if that was the roommate Rio's group. The guildmaster confirmed it was Nils, Edo, and another man, and surprisingly, Abel knew them. Abel said he met them only briefly and already believed they would grow into true adventurers who value survival. Ben Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, sharply interrupted and asked what they wanted from them. When the goblin archers on the 5th floor were confirmed, Phelps inquired of the guildmaster. He asked the Crimson Swords and White Brigade to search the dungeon for signs of another major surge. When monsters suddenly increase in number and beasts from higher levels appear from above, the guildmaster offered 100 gold immediately and another 200 upon return. Abel saw the clarification. Whether they only needed to check if there would be a big splash, the guild master confirmed and ordered to return immediately if discovered. He laid out the plan to set up a double barrier to cut off the monsters from the city, hold the defense with knights, and prepare a counterattack. He asked them to enter the dungeon the next morning, and for now not to let new adventurers and the staff at the entrance would stop others, and ask if they agreed. Havel said that the Purple Swords agreed and felt that they were approved for the White Brigade. On Tuesday, shortly after 9 in the morning, someone asked if their report brought any new details. The man with nails and Edo said that the guild posted an announcement because of their report. The man wondered where Rio was, remembered that he mentioned the library. A sudden announcement from the guild broke the silence. Expeditions to the dungeon are suspended from Tuesday until further notice. On a gloomy Tuesday morning in Lyon, a little after 9, Rial headed to the South Library hoping to find books about Akuma and learn more about his new world. Meanwhile, some man Edo and Nell rushed to the guild's bulletin board and noticed that the dungeon was temporarily suspended. The dues implied that after their report, more information had arrived. In the dungeon, Abel met Phelps. He, looking at the size of the squad, confirmed that only half of the white squad had arrived, with about 20 adventurers of rank C and above missing, while those of rank D and below remained in the city ready to set out. Stunned, Abel glanced aside and noticed the guild master, who reminded him that he had said yesterday he would be at the branch near the entrance to the dungeon to quickly resolve issues when they returned. He urged them to depart, but Abel asked for just a minute. He said the first floor caused unease. They asked Luen to scan it with wind magic, and Luen agreed, raising the spell to the sky. Soon she exclaimed that there were over 100 monsters on the first floor alone. Phelps shouted that a great influx had begun, and the guild master ordered everyone to rush to the top of the stairs and call for help from the barracks knights. As soon as they retreated through the door, behind their backs the heavy metal gate slammed shut with a rumble, sealing the stairs, and the man confirmed that everyone had reached the top and the entrance was securely closed. But with horror he noticed beastly claws bending next to you, while a multitude of goblins swarmed the corridors. Under Gauntlin's roar, a fierce battle erupted. Abel ordered to act from afar with long-range magic and arrows, while the vanguard covered the mages and archers from enemy spells and projectiles. The hero's arrows hit, felling many goblins. In the Adventurers Guild, 9 announced over the phone to Manga that the Great Tie had brought monsters into the city, allowing them to attack from afar. Archers lined up along the dungeon gate walls, preparing arrows, and Nain reminded them to drink water. Abel noticed that there were mostly goblins and a few archers here, so he anticipated a battle of endurance, and Luen said they needed to defeat them to reach the bosses. Abe noticed that there were only goblins here, relentless until the general was killed, who did not appear so easily. A goblin mage appeared, and someone sorrowfully uttered about the approaching magical attacks. The warrior noticed the guild master and pushed him toward the northern dungeon wall, where warriors were fighting goblins head-on. The guild leader, seeing this, wondered had the knights used up all their arrows. He encouraged the knights, saying that together they would easily crush the goblin horde. The earth mage whispered a spell and a stone wall arose, protecting Phelps from attacks. The sorcerer loudly declared that the goblins would soon fall with next goblin mages. Phelps cut the beast in half with his spear, exhausted, and managed to thrust his sword into the ground amid the goblin horde. Nearby, Warren tossed a goblin into the air with his shield, and Abel, with a barely noticeable smile, felled another goblin archer. Urging everyone to hold on a little longer, goblin. Before Abel lost his essence, a distant hum was growing. Phelps froze and looked at the far end of the first floor. From there appeared 3 giant goblins sowing alarm. 3 goblin generals and countless goblins were defeated. Everything pointed to the Goblin King lurking deeper in the dungeon. It was reported that Goblin Kings for several decades led thousands and could raise entire cities. There were over 10,000 goblins in the dungeon, so the king could be among them, although such a thing had never happened in dungeons before. Abel confessed to Phelps. He did not know how strong the king was, but wanted to defeat the generals before the king appeared. Abe decisively said he would take on 1 goblin general himself, entrusted the second to the leader of the White Brigade, and left the third to the rest of the squad. With a sharp leap, Abel rushed at the goblin general and struck him up close. But the blow barely touched the enemy. The mage threw a fireball between Abel and the beast. Suddenly, their hand-to-hand fight was interrupted. Abel stepped back a few steps, thinking over his next move. The goblin general lunged at him fiercely, but he skillfully dodged to the side. Coordinating their tactics, Phelps exchanged a warrior's smile with Abel and enjoyed the battle. The leader of the White Brigade launched a spinning attack on his goblin general, and in a moment, both noticed something strange from the back part of the first floor. Abel shouted for everyone to duck when a huge white lightning struck 3 goblin generals from the waist up. The warriors ducked and covered their ears as the projectile thundered overhead. Someone asked if it was the Goblin King, and at that moment, a monster burst out of the darkness. Abel wondered if it wanted to kill them along with its generals. The attack worked only from their movement, without any spell, so there was powerful magic here. Deciding to stay close, he shouted that together with Phelps they would take on the monster. But when they approached the Goblin King, his sudden attack stunned them. Abel raised his sword at an angle to deflect the beast's blow, straining under its pressure. While Phelps was noticed in the opening, Phelps struck the beast's arm with a spear during its attack. Forcing the monster to roar, Abel kept his gaze fixed on it. Together they dealt relentless blows to the monster, fighting with fierce determination. The monster was severely injured by the 2 agile warriors. In a moment of inattention, Abel stumbled and, cursing, fell. The Goblin King saw a chance to rush at him. Abel shouted for Phelps to duck, and the leader of the White Brigade rushed to him, shouting his name. Abel unleashed his absolute shadow combat technique. Galvin lunged forward, preparing to strike. When they clashed, Abel released his perfect piercing sword strike. He struck the beast at close range. He shouted for Luen to attack while he pinned it down. From afar, Luen and someone else saw the colossal beast Abel was fighting. Abel used the absolute shadow again, and the strike of this technique tore the wind and raised dust that scattered over the distant city. In the dungeon, a large dark mark lay on the floor, like a scar on the very earth. And Lin looked completely stunned. The goblin came with a gaping dark stick on his chest. Phelps fell to his knees before Abel. Approaching, Phelps saw the beast kneeling in the middle of a dark puddle. Abel stood unable to believe his eyes. The tavern was crowded. The crowd raised their mugs and loudly celebrated something that Rio did not even suspect. Some man noticed Rio and called him over. Rio joined them, and Nils said with a smile that he would eat enough for a whole week. The man greeted Rio joyfully, was glad that he finally came at the beginning of the party, and invited him to eat and drink freely. A delicious plate was placed in front of Rio, the guild's signature dish. Nils, lively as always, arrived late and loudly encouraged Rio. Take a mug and a plate from the side and eat to your heart's content. Still confused, Rio finally asked what they were celebrating. He was explained that on that day the Great Splash happened, a rare event he had heard about at a seminar, and which occurs once every few years. When Rio realized that they survived the Great Splash, it finally dawned on him why this was a victory celebration. He had only one thought in his head, to grab the plate before Nils continued his story. Soon Nell enthusiastically told about Abel's incredible combat skills. He was equally skilled with a bow and a sword, and almost single-handedly defeated the Goblin King. Ray wondered why Abel only barely defeated that king. Nils explained that the final blow was dealt by Lin, but only because Abel pinned the beast down and shouted for everyone to attack. Rio thought it would have been a disaster if it had hit Abel. She guessed it was a wind spell. Edo, who was dozing near Nils, and Wilkins added that it was actually bullet rain, a rare high-level spell. Nils shuddered, looked at Edo, who immediately fell back into a doze from overeating. Ray said that bullet rain sounded cool, and Nils agreed, explaining that it releases dozens of invisible blades and gives a feeling of relief as if it is impossible to hit you. Someone's voice added that Abel avoided them using his martial arts. Abel appeared next to the guys, striking a heroic pose. Rio asked about martial arts and was able to explain swordsmanship techniques, such as absolute shadow, which helped dodge magical and ranged attacks. The name seemed cool to Rio, and anticipating a comment, he laughed. Rio said that Nils praised Abel's heroism, which embarrassed Nils, who tried to hide, and Abel added that Nils and his friends were vital, reloading the archer's arrows and preventing defeat, and Nils stood proudly, barely containing his admiration. Abe threw out that with Rio it would have been easier for them to win. Asked where he was, Rio replied that he was in the library, and jokingly said that he did not steal the moment of victory from Abel, to which Abe asked him to be quiet. Then Lin and Rio appeared, happily saying they found Abe because they knew he was definitely taking refuge near Rio and was worried, and confused Abe denied, saying he only noted that the fight would have been easier with Rio. Rio delivered a message from the guildmaster. Tomorrow at noon they must appear before the Margrave and Abel must be there. Rio T said that it was a generous reward for Abel's brilliant performance. Abel insisted that the final blow was dealt by Lin, but she only told him to stop dodging credit. Lin replied that her spell worked only because Abel pressed the goblin down with his sword, then turned to Rio and asked if he really could, as Abel claimed, summon tall ice walls from afar. Smiling, Rio confirmed that he could create ice walls up to 40 meters high in the sky above himself. Lin, stunned, began to speak, but Rio interrupted, saying that it was difficult at first and that mastering it required a lot of practice. Someone still shocked glanced aside and warned the others to stop risking. Among the young people, a chaotic quarrel broke out, something fell to the floor, and they called for a rag to clean up. 5 days after the great battle for the tide, a man passed by a group of 5-legged figures on the street and instantly recognized them as a research team. At the guild headquarters, Nils stood before the mission department and noticed with disappointment that it was empty. 9. Nearby they apologized and explained. In the last 2 days all missions of rank E and F were taken, and the procurement department temporarily suspended the release of new ones. Nils, stumbling over his words, loudly told 9 that it was not her fault, the purchasing department's fault, and then thanked her for her efforts. Behind him, Edo and another man suddenly appeared, and Rio, a little embarrassed, approached and found out that they had come for missions and why these missions were not available. They were asked if Rio had made any purchases. He replied that he had seen magical copper for alchemy practice, but the purchasing department did not sell it. He was going to get it on the 5th floor of the dungeons and was not worried, even though it was not available in local shops. One man asked if the magical copper was really on the 5th floor, and Nils wondered if it was expensive. Rhea replied that a fist-sized piece was last sold for 500,000 florins or 50 gold coins. Edo bitterly explained that the tension between the guild and the alchemists had pushed the prices of magical copper up in the city. Rio stepped forward and offered the group a mission, asking if they would take it from him specifically. He whispered that magical copper could be found in an abandoned mine near the village of Russi, just half a day's walk away. They were offered 4 coins per person and 25 for each fist-sized piece, but only if everyone returned alive. The group enthusiastically agreed, and M1 loudly praised the terms. Rio calculated that it was cheaper than buying directly and noted that it was not a guild task, so their rank would not increase, but they were fine with that. The three friends set off for the mine. Rio could have managed alone but chose to help his roommates earn money. He already had enough and did not want to give handouts. While they collected magical copper, Rio seized the moment and honed his alchemy skills using urban improvised materials. In the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, the books were specialized, not general. Luen approached the special carved doors leading to the forbidden archives. Only Margrave-authorized individuals or B-rank and hired ventures were allowed in. Secret materials rested in the archives, the highest level spells of all elements and forbidden magic. After studying, Luen realized this spell was not on the list, therefore none of them created distant icy walls. In the Central Nations, all magical spells and formulas were recorded, even her spell that overthrew the Goblin King. High-level magic required experienced mages. Her spells could destroy the bearers themselves, so access was strictly limited. But Luen found no trace of Ryo's combat spells that relied on incantations to create magical effects. Anyone with magical talent can pronounce spells and create magic. And as skill grows, they step-by-step move from simple to increasingly complex intermediate and advanced spells. However, there is a unique type of magic that requires neither spells nor even Ryo's thoughts. It resembles a water version of the explosive magic used by Fire Mage. The famous Fire Mage, known for creating the highest level magic, the kind no one had seen before, cannot understand how magic works without spells, and the very idea of original magic confuses her even more. From the shadow behind Luen, a woman steps out and says they haven't seen each other for a long time. Luen slowly turns around. Who could have sneaked up so quietly? She instantly notices a long, slender sword on the woman's belt. Suddenly, she recognizes Sarah, the only one from Wing Group Rank B, who still remains in the city of Lu. Luen smiles and greets Sarah. The girl then asked what Luen was doing in such a strange place. Luen explained that she was researching something but found nothing. It was heard that Sarah was on missions in the capital. She herself said that she really was on the road but returned yesterday, then said goodbye and went to the library, which was already waiting for her. Annoyed, Luen decides that it is better to go home. From room 10 in the Adventurers Guild dormitory, there is a view of the courtyard and the training ground. While Nils, Ito, and Ammon were on a mission assigned to Rio, our hero was testing new formulas and successfully created his first antidote. After he prepared his first antidote, suddenly someone shouted near the boy, demanding that he stop. Rio stops working and cautiously looks around. Where is this shout coming from? Then we see Dan from room 1. He decisively says that the girl clearly does not want to ask the men to leave her alone. One man firmly grabbed the young woman and insists that she can serve them drinks if she does well. They can keep her with them during their stay in the city. Through the low window, Rio watches what is happening in the courtyard. He instantly recognizes them as knights trying to take advantage of a young woman who recently became an adventurer and is about the same age as Ammon. He also notices that Dan is standing nearby. The men note that if she lives here, she is probably a new adventurer who is having a hard time and they could help her. They suggest that she keep them company for the night. Although the girl said no, Rio secretly hopes that he won't have to. He intervenes and thinks that there are surely many places in the city where those men could go to have fun instead. Then Dan yells at them, says the girl said no, and if they don't stop bothering her, they will be beaten. One of the knights turns to Dan and challenges him, repeat what you said. He lets go of the girl, who rushes to Dan and boldly declares that he will teach these adventurers manners. Behind Dan, who was covering her, 2 more adventurers joined. Knight draws his sword and says he will not kill the boy, but only teach him a lesson, and Dan should be grateful for that. Dan, alongside another adventurer, tensely faces Knight, holding his breath, preparing for the moment when the men will rush. Suddenly, Knight flips in the air and falls face down to the ground. Dan froze in place, not understanding what had just happened. Mike, cursing, struggles to get up and orders the adventurer not to move, and having risen a little, swears to teach him a lesson. But he falls again, this time landing on his back, and one of the knight's companions sharply asks Dan what he did to their friend. Dan insists that he did nothing, and says that the man just falls to the ground by himself. Seized by rage, the knight tries again to get up and rush at Dan, but falls face down to the ground, unable to stay on his feet. Dan stands, unable to believe his eyes, and watches as the man repeatedly tries to get up to attack but falls each time. The mage friends, like the adventurers, froze, equally puzzled and unable to comprehend the strange scene unfolding before them. From his low window, Rio calmly observes the situation. Then Phelps, the head of the White Brigade, steps forward and orders them to stop this spectacle. Dan instantly recognizes Phelps when Knight finally rises, and rudely demands to know who this long-haired man who just appeared is. Phelps sharply replies, they behave so disgracefully yet dare to call themselves Knights of Rome. Someone called on them to be ashamed of their actions. The knight, seized by rage, shouted that some adventurer was trying to lecture him on manners, but he was interrupted and told to be silent. After which Phelps calmly explained that the issue was not about adventurers, but that being a knight means upholding honor. And then the knight arrogantly threatened that no one would dare challenge the kingdom's knights. As if necessary, they could expel the leader of the Adventurers Guild from the city. Phelps, leader of the White Brotherhood, admits he is an adventurer but also a nobleman of this kingdom. He called himself Phelps, the direct heir of the Marcus Heinlein family. That night, upon hearing the Heinlein surname, they exchanged frightened glances, and another remarked that the captain of the Royal Knights is Alex Heinlein. Phelps acknowledges the truth. Alex Heinlein, the current head of the Marcus Heinlein family, is actually his father. The fallen knight retreated to his comrades and heard them shouting, "Stop defiling the honor of the royal knight," and immediately leave his field of vision. The present boys thanked the warrior and felt such confidence as if everything was fine. He waved it off. "No need to thank that knight, angered me." He praised Dan for his courage and ordered him to take the girl to her friends. Rio, still watching from his low window, sees the traveler begin to disperse. Phelps notices him in the window, asks if it is Rio, and Rio confirms his identity. The warrior greets Rio with noticeable pleasure, calls himself the leader of the White Brigade, and says he heard about her from Abel. Confirming that Rio used amazing magic, Rio modestly waves it off. It's nothing special and Phelps doesn't need to mention it. Phelps notes that all he saw was the knight that rushed at the adventurers and foolishly fell to the ground. Thanks to Rio's intervention, Phelps proudly addresses our hero, thanking on behalf of the Luen adventurers. But when he begins to bow, Rio waves it off. No need, he says. There is a history between him and Dan, and even if help was offered, Dan would not accept it, so Rio acted quietly. Phelps agrees, picking up Abel's words that Rio is not like everyone else. Rio thoughtfully wonders what exactly Abel told others about him. The leader of the White Brigade explains that Abel spoke about Rio during the Great Tide celebration. He says it would have been much easier if Rio had been nearby, adds that Abel rarely praises anyone so highly, and explains. It was Rio who saved the warrior and brought him back alive to the city, preventing the loss of the boat, which would have been a disaster for Luen. Phelps is sincerely grateful to Rio for saving the warrior's life and bringing him back. Suddenly, a woman appears in the doorway and tells the leader that it is almost time to leave. Phelps feels as if Rio is apologizing for the need to go and that he would gladly continue their conversation another time. Watching Phelps walk away, Rio quietly admits, "I am tired too." A joyful smile blooms on Rio's face. He sees that both the woman who came to take the leader and the leader himself are incredibly strong, and wonders, is it fitting for the heir of such an influential family to be an adventurer?